all of us have the capability, right? The stuff that allows us to be leaders. Empathy, the ability to have a vision, the ability to have drive, to have purpose, to have vision, right? All that is in every single human being,
Mm-hmm.
right? We have to start by leading ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
The challenge is when we have to lead others.
Mm-hmm.
Now, leading others requires us to be able to amplify the way we lead ourselves. So when we talk about vision, let's talk about values. When we talk about our own values, then you have to extend it to the team's values. And you also have to include other people's values. How do you align those values together? And how do you align your values, your team's values, together with the team's vision? Right? So, yes, everyone is born with a set of values, right? Or we may develop them over time. And then, but the skill in leading the team, in having team's value, because it is a skill, it can be learned. And because it can be learned, the question then becomes is, are people willing to learn it?
This episode of the Life and Leadership Connected podcast. I'm so excited that you're here. My name is Dahlén and I am your host. In this podcast, we talk about life purpose, our why, that it gives us meaning and direction for what we do in life. We talk about life and leadership. What gives us life? How do we become and continue to be good leaders with great impact on other people? How do we combine life and leadership in a healthy and sustainable way? These are questions we will discuss in this podcast. If you want more information, go to lifeleadershipconnected.com, lifeleadershipconnected.com. I'm your host and coach, Dahlén. Let's dive right into this episode.
Okay, hello and welcome to a new episode of this Life and Leadership Connected podcast. And today I have a very special guest here that I'm very glad to have on my podcast, to have him on my show. His name is Daniel Lee. Daniel Lee, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, David, how are you? Glad to be here.
I'm very fine. Thank you. And as I usually do, I will give a short presentation of who Daniel is. He's a speaker and author and writer that lives in Singapore, right? You live in Singapore, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And you've written a book together with another author called Avi Liran. Who is a co-author, and Avi is from Israel. And the book they've written together is called First Time Leader, and it was published 2021.
Yes. It's called First Time Leadership.
Oh, sorry, First Time Leadership. Okay, good. First Time Leadership. Yes. Yeah. And you have interviewed 220 leaders from 37 countries, 50% women, 50% men, about how do you become a successful leader, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And from what I've understood, you have a passion to just help team leaders to be effective leaders of their team, and get more effective in that,
Exactly,
and get more enthusiastic about that leadership, and also this book has then resulted in 30 principles of how you become a successful leader.
Yes,
and there's also a website called First Time Leadership where you develop these ideas also, I think that's it, and we will find more about this in our podcast.
Sure. Yep. Yeah. So first time leadership really, if I just give your audience a bit of a background about myself.
Yeah,
So
please
first
do.
time leadership really started back in 2016.
Yeah.
I was working for a really large global bank. You might have heard of them. They're called the Standard Chartered Bank. They're from the United Kingdom, and they have a pretty large presence in Singapore. So my role in that bank, I was in learning and development, and I was looking after a training budget of US $5 million for 4,000 employees across the world. So I mean, US $5 million back in 2016. If you were to inflate it now, you'll probably be close to about 6.5 or maybe $7 million. But at the time, I was supervising four other colleagues, and I thought to myself, all right, I'm probably just one small step away from finally getting that promotion to be a team leader. So just to give the audience a bit of insight into myself, I was never officially promoted to lead a team within for my entire work life in large organizations. So like I said, the closest I got was in Standard Chartered. And then I thought I was doing pretty well. And then one day my boss pulls me aside, and he tells me that he needs to talk to me. So I think for many of your audience, if your boss tells you that he needs to talk to you, it's probably not a very good thing. And so I asked, so what is it? And my boss, his name was Tim at the time. So Tim said to me, look, Daniel, I need you to show more leadership. And at the time, I was surprised. I mean, I said to him, look, I'm delivering on my results. I don't have any complaints from the people around me, and I seem to get along well with my colleagues. Isn't that leadership? And he told me no. All right, so I was left with this, with this thing of trying to find out what exactly is leadership. Now, I've had people ask me, well, why don't your boss explain to you what leadership is? And what I've come to realize is that sometimes there are many people who sort of intuitively understand what leadership is, but they would struggle to be able to explain it, to be able to teach it, right? That's why, that's why even teachers have to learn how to teach, right?
Yes.
So just like if you're going to be a coach, you have to learn how to coach. You
Yes.
can't just, I'm just going to just tell you and assume that is coaching, right?
Exactly.
So that then led me on this journey whereby I would read one leadership book a month just to understand what is leadership, because there was this question, what is leadership? And I will spend the next 3 years reading over 30 leadership books on the topic, and in the end, the more I read, the more confused I got.
Yeah.
Because one author would say that leadership is about vision. Another would have a book about delegation. Someone else will write a book about values. Another person would write about finding purpose and your mission, right? And that makes you a leader. And I had this question of, how do all these books, why is everybody saying something different? Why isn't there just one answer to what is leadership? And it took me a long time, but I realized that there's no one answer to leadership, because leadership is a combination of many, many principles or competencies or traits into one. And that is leadership.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yes.
And the book is called First Time Leadership. Who is I presume the book is written for new leaders, or who is the main people that you write the book for?
Yeah. Look, the book was originally written for people like me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't I didn't have some grand plan to sell thousands of books, or at the time when I met my co-author Avi and we started to write this book, I just had a very simple question: what is leadership? And I just wanted to be able to answer that question. And so, there wasn't some great idea of I'm going to speak on stage, I'm going to be running workshops, I'm going to be selling hundreds of thousands of books. I just wanted to answer this question. And as we went about interviewing people, we started by just interviewing our friends and our contacts who were in leadership positions, whether they're team leaders, whether they're entrepreneurs, whether they're running their own businesses, whether they are senior leaders in the organization. And how it came to 220 leaders was just simply a case of, once we interviewed to about 30 people, we had more or less exhausted our contacts were willing to be interviewed. But they said, hey, look, we'll introduce you to our friends. And so it just went on and on and on. It was just friends introducing friends, and we went from one country to the next. We did this pre-COVID, and we did the interview did some of the interviews through COVID as well. Many of the about 40% of about 90 of the interviews were in person, done in Singapore, because for those in your audience who might not know of Singapore, Singapore is a very cosmopolitan place, right? It's a city where East meets West, and we're right here in Southeast Asia. And it's a very modern place with people from many countries working and living here. And so it's, we were able to interview, just in Singapore alone, we were able to interview people from New Zealand to from New Zealand to Canada, from South America all the way to Russia, right? We could find these people here because these interviewees introduced their friends, and eventually we reached to a point whereby we interviewed 220 leaders from 37 countries, and then we realized, hey, many of these people are saying the same thing, and that's how eventually the 30 principles came about.
Wow.
Yes.
But did you, because you interviewed half women, half men also, was that a purpose from the start, or did that develop, or?
Yeah, it was. We started out not having that purpose, right? For us, we were just focused on interviewing people and finding people to be interviewed, and then the person who wrote the foreword for our book, Gary Rich. So Gary Rich is he was the former CEO and chairperson of WD-40. So WD-40 is an industry lubricant. It's a very common household product in some parts of the world. And so when he asked us how many people we had interviewed, and then he further asked how many men and women, we said, well, we had interviewed about 25% women and 75% men. And he said to us, well, that's not good enough. I want my contribution to be part of a research where it's 50% women and 50% men. And so we just kept, and so we made it a point to interview as many women as possible from that point onwards. And by the time we finally hit 50-50, it was about 220 leaders.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. That's it's quite an effort, quite an amazing.
Yeah. It took a lot of time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Another question I have for you, Daniel. How would you define leadership? What's the definition that you're given?
Now, for me, leadership is about bringing others to success. Right. And, I was able to come to that because one thing I realized is that everybody has their own definition of what leadership is. Sometimes I've heard one lady say that leadership is about bringing people to overcome challenges, which is all part of that. What I come to realize is that regardless of what is your definition of leadership, the principles that you use, whether it's empathy, compassion, collaboration, having purpose, having a vision, all these principles are consistent. Yeah, and I think that's the exciting and that's the interesting thing that we found, was that all these people around the world, they were all exercising the same leadership principles. Maybe in different ways, maybe their understanding of it is different. But when we looked at it, when we broke it down, it was all very, very similar.
Wow.
Yeah. Yes.
And you said it's about helping people to be successful. How can anybody become a leader?
Yeah, that is a question that I get asked every now and then. Then the question is, are leaders born or made? So I can say conclusively that for most of us, leaders are born. All right? And then made. So what do I mean by that?
Yeah.
Right? So now, as long as you're psychologically, you're emotionally, you're mentally healthy, you're a sound person, you're a normal person, you're not nuts, you're not crazy, right? All of us have the capability, right? The stuff that allows us to be leaders. Empathy, the ability to have a vision, the ability to have drive, to have purpose, to have vision, right? All that is in every single human being, right? We have to start by leading ourselves. The challenge is when we have to lead others. Now, leading others requires us to be able to amplify the way we lead ourselves. So when we talk about vision, when we talk about, let's talk about values. When we talk about our own values, then you have to extend it to the team's values. And you also have to include other people's values. How do you align those values together? And how do you align your values, your team's values, together with the team's vision? Right? So, yes, everyone is born with a set of values, right? Or we may develop them over time. And then, but the skill in leading the team, in having team's value, because it is a skill, it can be learned. And because it can be learned, the question then becomes is, are people willing to learn it? So, David, like I said, many of us have what it takes, but only a few of us are willing to be made into leaders. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. And you told us a little bit about your own leadership journey, that you had a boss that told you that you basically you're not a leader. Can you tell us a bit more about your journey as a leader? How has leadership looked like in your life? Can you give us some examples of that?
Okay. All right. Let me give you an example of when I didn't understand leadership. So we wind back the clock to 2016. So after my boss Tim had told me to show more leadership, I said to him, all right, I would. A few days later, there was a team meeting with my colleagues. And I told myself, all right, I'm going to show my colleagues some leadership. So we had to come into this team meeting because we had to come up with a solution to a workplace problem. And throughout the whole hour discussion that we had, I spent much of my time just trying to enforce my suggestion on my colleagues, right? Clearly, both you and I would know, and anyone who would know that if you just try to force your ideas onto people, they would resist. Okay, but I walked out of that meeting thinking, hey, I mean, at the end of the meeting, what had happened was that we were able to come into a compromise where much of my ideas was accepted by the team, right? And I thought that was a win. But then what had happened was that my colleagues had informed my manager that I was being too forceful and that I was not being a team player. So that made me realize that I needed to do something different, but I didn't know how. And it was really through the interviews with the leaders from around the world. And I think the advantage that I had was that I was I would get these one-on-one times with these leaders, right? I mean, even though I'm interviewing them, it's kind of like them coaching me at the same time.
Yeah.
And so I would be getting different insights about what leadership is. And when I finally understood leadership, I realized one very important thing, right? Which is now what I do when I work with other people, is that it is not about your idea or someone else's idea. It's about, does everyone win, right?
Yeah.
If your idea allows everyone to win, that's great. If someone else's idea allows everyone to win, that's great. And the hallmark of a leader is to ensure that everyone wins. And so if someone else's idea should be supported so that everyone wins, then go for it. Right? Because one of the things with being a leader that I come to realize is that, and which you mentioned earlier, is this. Many of us, as we go through life, we face a lot of experiences. And some of these experiences are good and bad, right? And the bad experiences traumatize us in different ways. And so when we are put into a position of power and authority, these negative experiences, these bad experiences, these traumas, they start to play up. They start to review themselves, because inwardly we are all trying to do away with these traumas, and we feel that if we have the power of a leader, these traumas will finally go away. And one of the things that I realized was that on that day when I was having my team meeting with my colleagues, the reason why I was trying to force my idea onto them was because I wanted to be heard. Right, as in HEARD. And I wanted people to acknowledge, to listen to the ideas that I have. And so as I was interviewing all these leaders later in my research, it got me to reflect. It got me to realize that, the successful leaders are the ones who just ensure that everybody is winning together. Right? It is not about their ideas. And that's what I do now. When I work with my clients, it is about what is it that the clients want. What is it that I can do to help them achieve their outcomes, right? I may go into a client discussion with some ideas, but I now tell myself, look, just listen to what they have to say, right? Make them feel heard, and then come out with a win-win solution that makes them feel like, yes, that is what we want. Yes, yeah.
Wow.
So leadership has definitely changed a lot for me, and it has definitely, in a sense, it has in order to be made into a leader, I've had to change myself. So where I used to be a very task-oriented person, I am still focused on goals, but I've also now spent a lot more time just listening to people, because I've come to realize that, everyone is trying their best. And sometimes, when we don't measure up to the expected standard, it's not because we don't want to. It's just sometimes we don't know how to. Yes.
Yes. Wow. Thank you. Thank you. In one of your blog posts, you write something like this: we shouldn't focus on a particular leadership style, as different situations demand different leadership styles. Instead, we should focus on how can I be the sort of leader only I can be. Can you do you know what you mean, and can you explain that a little bit?
Yes,
Please.
yes. So one thing that I found, and this is not targeted at any particular people who advocate leadership styles, right? When you search leadership style, you will get things like, you'll get a range from autocratic to democratic, participative, authoritative, this and that, right? These are leadership styles. And one thing I tell my participants when I'm in workshops or when I'm giving a talk is that all of us have the full range of leadership styles. There are times where we need to be directive, where we need to be the boss and say, all right, guys, everybody, we need to just go ahead. There are other times where, all right, it is not a life and death situation. Let's get some insights from everyone, right? We can be more democratic. And then there are, we shouldn't get too stuck on, I'm a people person, or I'm a task-oriented person, or I'm a results-driven person, or I'm a person who likes to talk about visions and goals and big pictures and or I'm a big picture idea person. Because what is the situation in front of you that you as a leader have to deal with? Does this situation require you to talk about goals and targets and set them? Does this situation require you to remind your team of why they are on this journey? Right? Does the situation require you to sit down with some team members and ask them, how are you? How's work? The whole idea of leadership styles, it confuses people, right? It confuses people to think that, because I've done this assessment and it says that I'm democratic, so everything that I'm going to do is going to be democratic. No, there are times where you have to be the boss. You have to just get down and say, everybody, we need to go for it. We need to do this.
Yeah.
Right? So instead, what I tell the people that I work with is that you may have certain preferences. If I was to do a leadership style assessment, I would come up with participative or democratic leadership style as my preferred style. But it doesn't mean that when the time calls for it, I cannot be directive. Right? So the leader, especially if you're leading a team, you need to know what is the situation. Right. So some people may call it situational leadership, but even situational leadership has its own model. And I think the point that I was trying to make is that regardless of whatever these styles are, you have all of them. What is the situation? And then adapt to the situation accordingly. Not all situations will require that same style. You have to adapt.
Yeah, that's good.
Yes.
Thank you. And you also speak about I think I've read it in your blog post somewhere that in order to lead others well, you need to know yourself first and be conscious about yourself. I think you say something like this: the clearer you are about who you are as a person, the easier it is to lead in what is uniquely you.
Yes.
And you have this model that you have that's called the first time leadership 3C model, which is consciousness, create, and consequence. And I think you touch I think this covers it a little bit. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Okay, great. So thank you very much for asking about that. So the 3C model, right? Consciousness creates consequence.
Yeah.
That was my attempt to be able to create a kind of a logical process flow
Mhm.
for what effective team leaders are. Because I mean, what I do is that I enable team leaders to engage their teams,
Mhm.
right? And so the very first thing that new team leaders, because I work with a lot of first-time leaders, new team leaders, and even experienced team leaders, and I almost always tell them one of the things that you need to do is that if you want to be able to lead yourself, the first thing you need to do is to know how. If you want to be able to lead others,
Mm.
you need to know how to lead yourself,
Mm.
right? And there are many leaders who are not aware of their of of how they behave, of how they come across, right? So let me give you an example of what I actually do with when I'm working with leaders. One of the things that I get them to do is to do a very simple disc profile, DISC,
Mhm.
right? And in that profile, it identifies whether they are D or D, which is for dominant, I for influence, S for supportive, and C is for compliant. Basically, someone who is a D is very task driven. Someone who is an I is more of a people person, right? Someone who's an S, sorry, someone who's an I is more of a big picture person. Someone who's an S is a real people person, and someone who's a C is about procedures and process.
Mhm.
So we do this very simple exercise, and the participants get to see, oh, right, these are their profiles. But which then helps them to better understand, right? That is why they like to talk about, a leader who is a very strong C, who's compliance, usually talks about what are the procedures, what are the rules, how do we do things,
Mm.
right? Someone who is a very strong S, which is supportive, might be talking might automatically think about, okay, I need to have the one-on-one times with my team member. I need to be able to sit down and find out how are things going on for them. Someone who is a very strong D might be saying, hey, look, these are the goals, these are the targets, and we need to achieve them. And someone who's a very strong I is talking about big picture.
Mm.
I Effective leaders need to understand this is how they operate. But at the same time, they need to understand that there are all these other quadrants. So just because you're a big picture person doesn't necessarily mean that someone who is a goal oriented, task driven person is necessarily going to take a liking to you constantly talking about the big picture,
Mhm.
right? Or you may have team members who need to know how to go about doing something. They might be very strong on the compliance side.
Mhm.
Then you as a leader, in order for you to be effective, it's not enough for you to understand how you lead yourself. It's also important for you to understand how other people want to be led.
Mm.
Yes. And so in order for a team leader to be an effective leader of others, yes, they have to first start off by knowing more about themselves.
Mm.
Because it is only by knowing more about themselves, where they come from, what are their preferences, what are their values, what are their priorities, can they then start to accommodate and collaborate with their team.
Mm.
Because as the leader, you may go to work for certain reasons,
Mm.
but the people in your team, they go to work for their own reasons,
Mm.
right? And so being the effective leader requires you to not just know why you are leading, right? How you are doing it, but also understanding how why people want to be led
Mm.
and how they want to be led.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. And something that, like a concept that relates to this is purpose. Often you can ask a person, what is your purpose? What is your why? And that's also one of the questions I ask in this podcast.
Yes.
So if I would ask you this question, what's your purpose? What's your life purpose that gives you motivation for what you do, Daniel? This is a bit broader question.
Yes. Yeah. For me, life is about life is about creating. Oh, sorry. I had this one saying which I just sort of lost it. Okay, yes. The purpose of life is to create a life of purpose. All right.
Can you develop that a little bit?
I'll expand on that. That's right. Yeah, the purpose of life is to create a life of purpose. When I was in corporate, my purpose was just to climb up the ladder, was to look after my family. When I left corporate, it became look after still provide for my family, but at the same time try to answer this question of what is leadership. And once I answered the question, once the book was published, the purpose became, how can I take what I've uncovered and share it with as many people as possible? I think when it comes to being a leader, now it doesn't really matter whether you're a leader for a non-profit, for profit, you work in a small company, you work in a global organization. When you are put into a leadership position, you have to find your purpose. If your purpose is shallow, now I'm going to use the word shallow in a very respectful way, because you see, there are many participants there are many people that I've worked with where they tell me, oh, I'm in this leadership position because I was promoted by my organization, because it's for career advancement, right? And so I just need to ensure that I'm managing my team well. I don't have to be the best leader in the world, right? And so for them, that's their purpose, right? And purpose is important when it comes to leadership, because as a leader, you're dealing with people, and people are complex, emotional organisms, right? Every day, every hour, there's something going on. And if your purpose for being a leader in the workplace is just to collect a paycheck, then how much of a leader are you really going to be? I would say that person is going to be more of a manager, right? Just managing things, just keeping things running.
Yeah.
But if your purpose for being in a leadership position is to be able to coach, to guide the next generation of people coming in, then, for people like that, they take their roles a lot more seriously. For me, like I said, my purpose is to be able to share what I've uncovered with as many people as possible. So regularly, every day, I might be on social media, I might be talking to someone, I might be at a workshop, I might be at a talk, I might be thinking about what's the next thing that I can do. Because purpose can really drive you, right? It's like when you have a deep enough why, right, the how would review itself. Yeah, there are many things that I did that I look back and I wonder, how did I actually go about doing that? How did I manage to sustain in what I'm doing for so long? Yeah. If it's just purely for money, I would have not stayed. I would have not been an entrepreneur for such a long time.
Yeah.
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 Purpose is very important because, like I said, when you're clear on why you are doing it, you know, then you will figure out what you have to do and how you can go about doing it. And as you go about with the what and the how, right? You are leading. You are leading, and people are noticing. And then for those who resonate, for those who are attracted to your message, they will start to follow you. And that was one reason why I kept going, even though there were many moments during the early years when I thought to myself, maybe I should just stop. Who's going to read the book? Who's going to be interested in this research? Right? So what if I've interviewed 90, 100, 150 leaders? We have put so much of our time and money into this. Are we going to get any returns from our investment, right? If what I'm doing now is just purely because of money, I would have stopped. Yeah. But because it's a mission, and it is a mission onto somewhere. It's a continuous journey of uncovering what it takes to be an effective leader, not just at the team leader level. I mean, I have a new research called Leading from the Middle, where I'm currently researching on what it takes to be an effective head of department. So to be an effective leader of leaders. And what I can say is, when you are a team member, right, all you have to do is just lead yourself. When you become a team leader, your job becomes leading other people. And then when you become a leader of leader, your job is to be an organization leader. So it goes from self-leadership, team leadership, to organization leadership. And at each stage, there are principles, competencies, traits, insights that are similar, but also different as you go from one level to the next. Yeah. And what I can say so far is that one thing that keeps driving me is just uncovering, being that explorer, just trying to not just understand. Now, I just want to say that what continues to drive me, what continues to give me purpose, a lot of the things that I've uncovered is not new. The only difference is that I'm actually putting it all together. And one of the reasons why my co-author and I wrote First Time Leadership was that there were very few books that were focused on putting all or as many of the research together into one book.
Wow.
Yes. You can have a whole book about vision, you have a whole book about purpose.
Yeah.
But to put 30 different principles into one book, now that we couldn't really find.
Wow.
And that's why we went about writing First Time Leadership.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. We're going to take a short break here, like a couple of minutes, for some information, but we will be back right soon. Dear viewers and listeners, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you want coaching and be coached towards purpose, be equipped for life and leadership, or find ways to a balanced life, then go to lifeleadershipconnected.com, lifeleadershipconnected.com for more information, and to sign up for a free consultation call. I am your coach, David Dahlén. Okay, welcome back. I'm interviewing Daniel Lee here. Daniel Lee, who's written the book First Time Leadership. Daniel, I have another question here. You speak about different models, or a few models in your book, and one of the another model is called 3E model: engagement, effectiveness, and enthusiasm. Can you explain a little bit more about that also? The 3E model.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So the 3E model is what an effective team leader has to do. I enable team leaders to engage their teams with effectiveness and enthusiasm, right? So it's about effectiveness, engagement, and enthusiasm. So the 3E model is really the what an effective team leader has to do, right?
Yeah.
An effective team, right? In order for, so you can imagine it's like a triangle, right?
Yeah.
Effectiveness is at the top. So in order for a team leader to be effective, they have to engage the team, right? As in, so engagement means it can be the one-on-one conversation, it can be the one-on-ones, it can be having lunch, it can be having team building activities, it can be collaborating, asking the team for ideas and all that. Now, that's engaging, but you have to engage in an enthusiastic way. Because if you want the team to engage with you, and it is not a once-off event, it's an ongoing thing, you have to be enthusiastic. And that's where your reason, your why, your purpose for being a leader, right? Is it just a paycheck, or is it a lot more, right? That enthusiasm feeds back into how effective you will be as a lead, as a team leader. And so that is the 3E model, right? So that is the what they have to do. And then the 3C model, which is consciousness creates consequence, is how they go about doing it.
Okay. Oh,
Yes.
interesting.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
In the leadership, it usually starts with the 3E model, and then it turns into the 3C model.
Okay. So the 3C. So it first started out with the 3C model, right? Which is consciousness. Consciousness creates consequence. So the whole idea behind the 3C model is, here's how you go about being an effective team leader, right? So consciousness is, you need to understand, you need to know what is effective leadership.
Yeah.
Create is, as the leader, you actually create the type of leadership experience that you want. Right? And then the consequence part is, well, how your team turns out is a result of what you have created.
Yeah.
Right. So that is the 3C model. The 3E model sits inside the 3C model. So the 3C model is about how we go about doing it. Then the 3E model is the what you have to do every day in order to create that consequence.
Another question that I usually ask here in the podcast is, tell me about what gives you life within the area of focus you have chosen to spend most of your time in life, and how you keep your energy at high level day by day. And my question is like, what has given you life and energy to keep you going every day in what you do, Daniel? I mean, you touched it a little bit when you spoke about purpose.
Yes.
But where do you find what gives you life when you have a tough day?
That's right. There are 4 things that I do now. All right. There's work, family, God, and country. All right. So work is clearly what I do with first time leadership, leading from the middle, all my leadership stuff.
Yeah.
Family, wife, kids, all that.
Yeah.
Religion is important to me.
Yeah.
And also country, right? Am I volunteering? Am I I volunteer with organizations that allows me to get involved with the community that I'm in. So how did I come to these 4 factors? So what it means is that when I make decisions, when I decide what direction I want to take, I ask myself, is this thing related to work, family, God, or country? So let me give you an example of something that I did which wasn't tied to any of these 4. So so I'm part of I'm part of a speakers association here in Singapore.
Mhm.
And there was a period of time where I had put my hands up to be part of a working committee.
Mhm.
But as I went about with that committee, I started to realize that because my work was keeping me pretty busy, I was unable to dedicate sufficient amount of time to this working committee. And so after a while, I just came to a decision where I told the person who was in charge of the committee that I'm no longer able to serve, and I will be withdrawing fully from the committee. Oh, now I think many of us are willing to are happy to say yes to something. But what I've learned is that it's actually more important to say no.
Mhm.
Because when you say no, then you're leaving yourself with the possibility of saying yes to something that you really want to do. And if you say yes, then you're saying no to many other things.
Yeah.
And so what I've just come to realize is that what keeps me going, what gives me life now is having this four factors in place, right? Is this thing in front of me related to work? Is it related to my family? Is it related to God, or is it related to country? Right? If it's these four, then I would more likely to say yes, and I would more likely to give my best. Because one of the things with being a leader is that you don't need to be leading others to be a leader, right? When you show up at the community event, at the work event, at a family event, be there 100%. Yeah, don't be there 50% and then the rest of the time you are thinking about work. Right? If work is so important, then be 100% at work. Right? Show up there 100% because people expect you to be 100% there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Just like when we are at work, we expect our bosses to be 100%. Even if it is a bad day for them, we still want our bosses to be 100%. Well, we are our own boss. We are the leader of our own lives. Wherever we are, we need to be there 100%. And the only way to ensure for me that I'm there 100% is to ask myself, is this thing related to work, family, God, or country? If it is, then and I'm willing to say yes, then that means that I am there 100%.
Yeah.
And so what this actually does is that it has drastically reduced the number of yeses that I've said. So I've learned to say a lot of no. So that when I say yes, I can show up 100%. Because like I said, people need you to be at 100%. Yes.
And by that, Daniel, you've also answered my fourth question about the balance in life. I just, for the audience, I just tell it, and it maybe have something to add. The fourth question I usually ask, tell me how you successfully combine your role as a leader of yourself and other people and your life as a healthy human being. And you just tell that. You have these four questions. So that's...
Yeah. And I will add one thing.
Yeah.
One thing that I do as well is that I keep myself fit, or I try to keep myself physically and mentally fit. The reason why I say this is because once I had this conversation with this person, and this person was talking about how they have a boss who is kind of fat, overweight, has some health issues, and then I said, hey, look, as a leader, you have to look after yourself so that you can be 100% to look after others. And then this person replied to me and said, well, look, if you're not there 100%, that's fine, because as long as you are there when you are really needed.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the thing. Leadership doesn't happen in the moment. It's not like, oh, this situation has suddenly happened and then this person rise up to become a leader.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we don't rise up to the level of expectations. We fall to the level of our training.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
what that means is that leadership is a lifestyle, right? You know, what keeps me going, what drives me, what gives me balance is that when I look after myself, I can then look after the people around me. So that is also one of the important things about being a leader. First, you look after yourself, then you look after the people around you, because the people around you, they always need someone to look after them, right? Whether it's your team, whether it's your family and all that, right? And if you only focus on looking after them and not looking after yourself, one day you are going to fall over, you're going to collapse, and then who's there to replace you?
Yeah, it's true.
Yes, and so that's the balance, right? First look after myself, so that I can give 100% to looking after those around me.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Daniel. And I think that wraps up much of this interview very good. And I wonder where if people want to get this book, First Time Leadership, where can they find that? Where can they go?
Yeah. So you can go to Amazon.com and just search for First Time Leadership.
Yeah.
You can get a copy of the book there. Now, if you are based in Singapore or in the Southeast Asia region, that's like in Indonesia, Malaysia, or you're in Thailand, or you're in Vietnam, then you can go to firsttimeleadership.com and buy the book directly from there.
Okay. Perfect.
Yes. So two areas.
Yeah.
Firsttimeleadership.com or Amazon.com.
Yeah. And if people want to contact you and ask you questions, where can they go then?
Yeah, that would be Daniel at firsttimeleadership.com.
Okay. Perfect. And do you have any last thoughts that you want to share with your listeners? Something that I missed asked you, or something that you want to say, Daniel?
Yes. One closing thought is this, right? When we look at a leader that we admire, we think that this leader has something that we don't, right? But I want to say to everyone here that whatever the leader has, we have it too. Whatever competencies, traits that leader that you admire has, you have it too. And why is that? The reason is very simple. That leader that you admire is a human being. And you are a human being. And the stuff that the leader has, we have it too. Which means that the capability to be a leader is already in you. The question to ask yourself is, are you willing to be made into a leader? And that is a question that I ask the people that I work with. Are you willing to be made? Because if you are, then be prepared for a pretty exciting journey.
Okay. Thank you, Daniel.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Okay. Viewers and listeners, viewers on YouTube and listeners on Apple Podcast and elsewhere. My name is David Dahlén Cruz, and this is the Life and Leadership Connected podcast. And thank you for listening and watching. And we'll come back when we release the next episode. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
All right. See you.